First, let's go to those shocking scenes out of Melbourne on the weekend where so-called anti-racism protesters clashed with police.
Weekly protests disrupting the streets of Melbourne. Over the weekend, violence, this time aimed at authorities.
This is what was thrown at police today, and I think Melbourne has had a gutful.
2 police officers were taken to hospital after being hit by a glass bottle. A female sergeant received a serious hand injury and a male senior constable suffered a serious laceration to his leg.
The people that came to pick the fight were police.
We go to worksafe fatalities all the time in our job, where people die in their workplaces. We don't like going to them when they're our own members. We've had a bad run of this of late. When we're doing our job, when we're trying to lower crime and keep vulnerable people safe, it shouldn't happen when we're at protests or demonstrations. We shouldn't be subjected to that level of risk.
Joining me now, Victorian Opposition Leader Brad Batten. Brad, thank you for your time. I made this point at the top of the show. The Premier says Melbourne is safe. I made the point she doesn't live in Melbourne. She lives 2.5 hours away. Do you think Melbourne is safe?
I don't think people in the community need to know what politicians think. The reality at the moment in Victoria is what we are seeing on the streets with those protests, where coppers are getting injured just going to work, where innocent people are being stabbed on their way to work in the morning, kids are getting murdered on the street on the way to a basketball game. That says it all, Peter. It's genuinely not a safe place at the moment. There are lots of things that can be fixed and areas we can address to fix that as quick as possible.
Why do we have to put up with these radical protest groups? Because we really yesterday got the first bit of honesty directly from the police. They made it clear it wasn't the everyday Australians waving their flags and speaking out against high rates of migration. It was the Antifa types, the professional hard left activist crowd who came to the protest ready for a fight. Now, why do we have to put up with this in Victoria every single weekend? It's not a feature of Brisbane or Sydney or Perth or Adelaide. Why Melbourne?
There is a very simple answer for that, Peter. We have to put up with the far left protests for one reason, because the government have failed to put in place the policies to stop it and they won't speak against it. They're the first out the front to try and bag other groups, but the reality at the moment is there's a far left group that have continuously got away with their protests and taking over the city, and the government won't bring in the permit system to ensure that we can protect the community and the businesses that have to close when this happens, and allow the families to come in who just want a day in Melbourne. They're the priorities we must put in place and bring back on our move-on laws. The toughest move-on laws in Australia should be here, because the biggest issue with protests that's causing the biggest lot of crime is right where we stand in Melbourne.
OK, you've worn the uniform before. In practical terms, if you had your protest permits, if you had your move-on laws, what would that have looked like in relation to yesterday?
In relation to yesterday, if there was groups coming in specifically for violence, to block streets or to create chaos, then they're the groups that wouldn't get their permit, because that's not about free speech, that's about violence. But groups that are coming in to have a say, even if I don't agree with it, they should be getting a permit to ensure that they're going to walk through the city or go to a place that's a safe location. They're not going to block businesses going about their everyday life of trading and trying to create jobs for the next generation. And more importantly, it's going to create a safe environment so parents can come in here with their kids and enjoy a day out without the fear of what they saw yesterday. And most importantly, the police would know what resources they need, where and when, and that way you wouldn't have the violence where 2 officers have been injured just going to work.
Surely if someone turns up with a balaclava on their face at a rally, the police are within their rights to grab them, throw them in the back of the divvy van, because anyone protesting with their face covered is there for another purpose.
That's 100%. If you're coming in to cover your face, not only are you a coward, but we should have the legislation in place that the government, let's not forget, Jacinta Allan promised this over 12 months ago, where she said, I'm going to get tough on protests and I'm going to ban face coverings. It's over 400 days later and it still hasn't happened. Now, that was when it was against the Jewish community to try and send a strong message. Well, I call on the government now, let's get those laws through as fast as possible, back our move-on laws and have the permit system, so these cowards can't come in here and attack police in gang mentality and create absolute havoc on the streets in Victoria.
Brad, what about that woman who was stabbed? It was 7:30 in the morning, as I said before. She was on her way to work. I think it was a Tuesday morning. Completely unprovoked. She had her lung punctured. She was in some serious strife afterwards. We only know about that because that CCTV footage about 2 weeks later was made public. It went viral. And then the police and then the Premier and indeed the Lord Mayor had to address what had happened. They've been telling us for 2 weeks over the machete attacks and other things, the carjacking in Burke Street, that the city was safe, but it wasn't safe if someone was stabbed on their way to work. Why the secrecy? Why the lies? Why is the government not being straight with us?
That's up to the government to answer now why they're not answering questions or what is being hidden when it comes to violent crime here in Victoria. We see it each and every day. You actually can't hide crime anymore because there's not only cameras everywhere, but everybody's got a mobile phone. We've seen it in Fountain Gate where kids have attacked another kid with a machete just recently. We saw it outside Luna Park, a machete attack again. We saw the tragic outcome out in Cobblebank where 2 kids were killed. And now we've seen a stabbing in Melbourne on the streets of just someone going to work first thing in the morning. The government can't hide this, so rather than hide it, fix it. And the best way to fix it is to put the laws in place so we've got sentencing in line with community expectations. Break bail, face jail, because many of these offenders are getting out after committing violent offences. We will make sure that doesn't happen and bring in Jack's Law to get the knives off the street. Don't wait and hope that the crooks will drop them off at the police station. Give the police the powers and the wands so they can go out and take the knives off the crooks at the locations to keep the community safe and lock them up if they want to carry around knives in Victoria.
You know, they're calling her Jacinta Andrews, you know, that she's Dan Andrews in a skirt. It certainly feels like that for Victorians. Isn't it time now, given where we are with crime in the state and the budget and all the other calamities, isn't it time for Jacinta Allan to resign?
Look, I'm not going to call on Jacinta Allan to resign. She's doing a terrible job. What I need, more importantly, is the Victorian community to know what we will do, because on November 28th next year, they're going to have a very clear choice. Jacinta Allan, who's got her head in the sand and thinks we don't have crime happening across the state, or myself, who will go out there and fight this crime and return the streets to those people who want to come in and enjoy our city. Or a government at the moment, with Jacinta Allan and Labor, who are letting a budget go out to the stage, we're focusing on, or end up with, nearly $29 million an hour in interest. I want to make sure we can have less waste here in Victoria and put that money into the services that Victorians thoroughly deserve. We need a fresh start, we need lower taxes, we need less waste and we need lower crime. I will deliver that. So let's not worry about what she's going to do. I'll worry about what I can do and give Victorians a genuine alternative.
Tell you what, things are pretty grim. Tourism's down, Brad. You mightn't have anything much left in the budget should you get there. Thank you for your time tonight.